The lie that sparked a revolution. There are moments in history where a single lie becomes too heavy to carry, and when spoken under oath, that lie doesn't just crumble a case, it ignites a reckoning. This is the story of a courtroom clash that began like so many others. A decorated police officer taking the stand against a black woman he claimed was aggressive, dangerous, and criminal. The officer's version was detailed, confident, and familiar, too familiar. But what no one in that courtroom expected was that the woman sitting silently across from him, Maya Robinson, wasn't just another defendant. She was the storm he never saw coming. And it all began with the moment he opened his mouth to speak, a lie so bold, so calculated, that it set off a chain reaction impossible to stop. Now, let's return to that critical moment, the lie that sparked the storm. It was supposed to be just another night. Officer Daniel Hayes, a veteran on the force, patrolled the quiet downtown streets with practiced ease, but what he claimed happened that night would set off a chain reaction he never expected. In his sworn statement, Hayes alleged he saw a suspicious figure, black, female, mid-30s, lurking outside a high-end jewelry store. He said she matched the description from a recent theft, and that when he approached, she grew hostile. In his words, she refused to comply, became verbally aggressive, and reached into her purse. I feared for my safety. The courtroom believed him at first. After all, Hayes had the uniform, the badge, and years of clean records. But what they didn't know was that every word was fabricated. There had been no suspicious behavior, no aggression, no threat. Officer Hayes wasn't just wrong. He was lying, and the person he was lying about wasn't someone who would let it go quietly. The woman behind the calm Maya Robinson didn't look like a threat. Standing at 5'6", dressed in a sleek navy suit and heels, she carried herself with quiet dignity. To the untrained eye, she was just another black woman caught in the system's web. But Maya was far from ordinary. A Harvard law graduate and a renowned civil rights attorney, she had spent years fighting for the voiceless. Until the night she became one of them, Hayes hadn't known who she was. He saw her skin before her identity, her calmness as defiance, but Maya wasn't just walking to her car. She was documenting patterns of police misconduct for an upcoming lawsuit. That night, she wasn't caught off guard. She was preparing for war. So when she was handcuffed and slammed against the hood of a squad car, she didn't just feel pain. She felt purpose. Hayes thought he had cornered her. In truth, he had just walked into her courtroom. And Maya Robinson was about to flip the script. A courtroom full of shadows. The courtroom was packed. Press, attorneys, quiet observers, and those who'd been watching the system for years, hoping it might finally blink. But today wasn't about hope. It was about Maya Robinson and the truth hidden beneath layers of polished lies. She sat calm, composed, a fortress of restraint. On the other side sat Officer Hayes, flanked by city lawyers, dressed sharp, still basking in the illusion of authority. The jury eyed them both, already leaning into the story they thought they understood. A veteran cop and a so-called unruly woman who'd acted out. The judge called the session to order, and the gavel wasn't the only thing about to drop. Everyone believed it would be routine, a testimony here, a few denials there, but Maya had walked in with more than a defense. She had a plan, a slow, burning fuse. What the courtroom didn't know yet was that every word Hayes was about to say would lead him straight into the fire. The officer's lie, spoken in uniform. Officer Hayes raised his right hand, swearing to tell the truth. He spoke with confidence, like a man who'd done this dozens of times, and he had, to him, this was muscle memory. A script he'd rehearsed with quiet arrogance. She was combative. He said, voice smooth and steady, refused to show ID, reached into her purse and made a sudden move. I feared she had a weapon. He paused, glancing at the jury with practiced solemnity. I was forced to act. I followed procedure. To the average listener, his story was believable. Hayes knew how to talk like a hero. He'd spent years dressing injustice in legalese, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker too still, too rehearsed. And Maya caught it. She leaned back, silently observing him dig his own grave. The courtroom was quiet. The truth hadn't walked in yet, but it was waiting in the wings because Maya hadn't come to play defense. She came with proof. The drive that changed everything just when Officer Hayes thought the courtroom was bending in his favor. Maya's attorney, Elijah Boone, rose slowly from his seat. With the ease of a man who knew he held a loaded deck, he approached the bench and requested to introduce new evidence. From his pocket, Boone revealed a small black USB drive, unassuming, but explosive. The judge raised an eyebrow, the prosecution objected, the jury leaned in. Boone said 6 words that shifted the room's weight. It's footage from across the street, security footage, untampered, clear as glass. Captured by a quiet bakery's security cam, one that just so happened to face the exact sidewalk where the incident unfolded. Hayes didn't flinch right away, but Maya noticed the twitch at the corner of his mouth. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this wasn't spontaneous. Maya had known about that camera long before her arrest, and tonight that tiny drive was going to make truth louder than any badge. The footage doesn't lie, the screen flickered on. What played next stripped the courtroom bare of illusion. There was Maya, calm and composed, standing outside the bakery, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. No erratic behavior, no yelling, no sign of threat. Then Hayes entered the frame. He approached her. She turned, paused her call, and handed over her ID. Just as he said she didn't. No sudden movements. No reaching for a weapon, just a peaceful exchange. Then, without warning, Hayes grabbed her wrist, spun her around, and shoved her onto the hood of his cruiser. Gasps echoed across the room. A juror covered her mouth. Even the judge shifted in his seat. There was no resisting, no weapon, no crime, just a lie, unraveled in high definition. Hayes sat frozen. For the first time, his voice failed him. The room no longer looked at Meyer as a defendant. They looked at her as a mirror reflecting something far bigger than one case. The system had been caught, and it was Maya who caught it. The whistleblower's confession as the footage ended, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs, uncertainty turning into disbelief. But Elijah Boone wasn't finished. With perfect timing, he called a new witness, Officer Jenna Mendez. Whispers broke out. Mendez had once patrolled alongside Hayes, until she requested reassignment with no explanation. Now eyes lowered but voice firm, she stepped into the box. "I'm here under federal protection," she began, "because I can't keep hiding what I've seen." The room stilled. Mendez revealed everything. Hayes had a long history. Fabricated reports, racial profiling, even planted evidence. "He targeted people of color," she said. He counted on their silence. Then her eyes met Maya's, but he picked the wrong woman this time. Her testimony wasn't just a confession. It was a damning indictment of a pattern too many ignored. And for the first time, it wasn't Maya who was on trial. It was Hayes and the system that had shielded him. Truth echoes louder than silence. The courtroom, once skeptical, now pulsed with raw awareness. As Mendez stepped down, no one looked at Hayes the same. He tried to compose himself, but the cracks had formed. The badge he wore no longer gleamed. It looked like armor falling apart. The truth had clawed its way out, and silence could no longer cover it. The prosecutor sat stiff, stone-faced. Even the judge leaned forward, fingers pressed to his chin, absorbing every revelation. Hayes' attorney whispered to him urgently, but it was too late. Elijah Boone stood once more and addressed the jury. "You've seen the truth, you've heard the lies, and now you must decide not just a verdict, but what kind of justice this courtroom stands for." A silence followed, not empty, but loaded. And in that silence, everyone knew the case had already shifted. The power was no longer with the uniform, it was with the truth. Justice turns the gavel. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. But to Hayes, it must have felt like a lifetime. When they returned, every face looked changed, hardened, awakened. The foreperson stood on the charge of resisting arrest, not guilty; on the charge of obstruction, not guilty. Meyer exhaled slowly. Calm on the outside, fire within. But before celebration could spark, the judge raised his hand. His voice turned grave. "Bailiff, detain Officer Hayes." The courtroom gasped. For perjury, obstruction of justice, and violation of civil rights. The man who had stood in judgment now stood accused. The silence was thunderous as his badge was taken, his wrists cuffed. Maya didn't smile. She didn't need to. Truth had done its work, and the system, if only for a moment, had turned on itself. Hayes didn't just lose a case. He lost his mask, and in front of cameras, reporters, and a rising tide of justice, he was marched out the same doors Meyer almost never walked back through. From victim to vanguard, Maya didn't walk out of that courthouse quietly. She walked out as a storm. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, but she didn't flinch. At the podium, she spoke not with rage, but with resolve. "I stood trial today not just for myself," she said, "but for every black man and woman who's ever been silenced, slandered, or sentenced by a lie." The crowd listened. The nation watched. She announced the launch of the Robinson Project, a legal coalition aimed at holding law enforcement accountable, providing support for falsely accused citizens, and demanding body cams and independent reviews in all misconduct cases. "This isn't about revenge," Maya said. "It's about reform, and I'm just getting started." What began as one officer's lie became the ignition of a movement. Maya Robinson wasn't just a name in a file. She became the face of a revolution. Not because she fought back, but because she refused to stay silent. Maya Robinson walked into that courtroom accused, underestimated, and framed. She walked out a symbol, a survivor, and a catalyst. What was meant to silence her only amplified her voice. What was meant to destroy her reputation built a platform for millions who'd never been heard. Officer Hayes thought the uniform gave him power. What he didn't realize is that truth, when armed with courage, outweighs any badge. The courtroom that once held her fate now echoed with her legacy. The Robinson Project didn't just rise, it roared. And for every person falsely accused, wrongly silenced, or unjustly profiled, her message remains simple: I wasn't the exception, I was just prepared. The system tried to bury her with a lie, but instead Maya Robinson became the woman who put the system on trial.